The house disappeared quietly.
No budie.
No warning. Just a sentence that was repeated until I believed it. "It's gone," my uncle said over the phone. "The bank took everything after the crash. There's nothing left." I was 28, newly divorced, and already exhausted by life. A financial crisis had ripped through our family like a fire, and everyone was scrambling to survive. I wanted to believe him because believing was easier than questioning. That house had been my grandparents', then my parents'. Then, after my mother passed, it was supposed to be mine one day. Not immediately. Not urgently. Just eventually. A future anchor. And suddenly, it was lost forever. My aunt handled most of the finances after the crash. She was practical, sharp, respected. The kind of woman who spoke in numbers and deadlines and always sounded like she knew what she was doing. "You were lucky," she told me. "We managed to avoid bankruptcy entirely."
Lucky.
I repeated that word to myself while packing boxes in my tiny rental apartment, surrounded by furniture I bought secondhand. I told myself that at least I didn't lose everything. At least I wasn't homeless. At least I still had family. For years, the story never changed. The house was foreclosed. The debt was too high. The market collapsed. Every time I asked, I got the same answer, delivered with just enough sympathy to shut me down. "Don't reopen old wounds," my aunt said once. "It'll only hurt you." So I stopped asking. Or at least I thought I did. 5 years later, I was scrolling through real estate listings late at night, half asleep, half nostalgic. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just liked seeing houses I could never afford. That's when I saw it. The porch. The windows. The tree in the front yard that my father planted when I was 10. My heart stopped. The listing said, "Sold. Off-market transaction." The sale date was 3 years after the crisis. Not during it. After it. I stared at the screen, refreshing the page, convinced I was imagining things. But the address matched. The photos were new, staged, expensive. The description talked about renovation potential and excellent resale value. Resale. My hands began to shake. If the house had been foreclosed, it couldn't have been sold privately. And if it was sold privately, it wasn't lost. It was hidden. I called my uncle the next morning. "There must be a mistake," I said carefully. "I saw a listing. The house was sold years after the crash." There was a pause on the line. Then a sigh. "Why are you digging this up now?" he asked. That was the moment everything changed. Not denial. Not confusion. Deflection. That night, I opened a notebook and wrote one sentence on the first page. They lied to me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't grieving the house. I was hunting the truth. For years, I believed the story they told me. After the financial crisis hit, everything collapsed at once. My job disappeared, my savings drained away, and the family home became the final blow. My uncle was the one who sat me down at the kitchen table, his voice heavy, his hands folded like a priest delivering bad news. He said the house had been seized by the bank. He said there was nothing left to fight for. He said I should be grateful we were not homeless too. I remember nodding, because I did not have the strength to argue. Grief has a way of making lies feel reasonable. The house was not just a building. It was the place where my mother planted roses every spring, where my father fixed the porch with his own hands, where every holiday photo we had ever taken was anchored. Losing it felt like losing them all over again. I moved away shortly after. A smaller city, a cheaper apartment, a life reduced to essentials. I worked long hours, avoided family gatherings, and trained myself not to ask questions that would reopen old wounds. Every time I passed a familiar street or smelled fresh paint, I thought of the house and quickly pushed the thought aside. Then one evening, everything shifted. It was accidental. A late night. Mindless scrolling. I was half watching a local real estate video when a drone shot froze my thumb mid-swipe. A white fence. A rebuilt porch. New windows catching the sunset at the exact angle I remembered. It was my house. Not just similar. Identical in shape, in trees, in the crooked oak on the left side of the yard. only it looked better than it ever had. Renovated.
Polished.
Expensive. The caption said the property had been sold 2 years ago after a full restoration. The listed price made my stomach drop. That was impossible. They said it was lost. They said the bank took it. They said there was nothing left. I watched the video 3 times, my hands shaking, my heart pounding harder with every replay. When the realtor casually mentioned the previous private sale and the significant profit margin, something inside me went cold. That night, I did not sleep. The next morning, I started digging. I pulled public property records. I learned how to read documents I had never needed before. Deeds, transfers, tax filings. At first it felt overwhelming, like trying to read another language. But patterns emerged quickly when you knew what you were looking for. The house had never been seized. It had been quietly transferred, sold, and resold within the family circle. My uncle's name appeared more than once.
So did my aunt's.
The profits were split, layered through accounts and shell transactions designed to look like debt repayment and emergency expenses. Money that should have belonged to all of us had vanished into their lives. New cars, vacations, a kitchen renovation they bragged about at Christmas. And I had been mourning a lie. The anger did not explode all at once. It sharpened slowly, like a blade being honed. I realized something else too. They did not just steal a house. They stole my consent, my chance to fight, my right to know the truth. So I stopped being quiet. I reached out to a financial journalist I knew from my marketing days, framing it as a hypothetical. I spoke to a lawyer under the guise of curiosity. Each conversation confirmed what I already feared. What they did was calculated, intentional, legal enough to hide, unethical enough to destroy trust forever. I documented everything, every screenshot, every record, every timeline. I built a narrative that could not be dismissed as emotion or bitterness. Facts do not flinch when challenged. And then I made a decision that scared me more than losing the house ever had. I would not confront them privately. I would let the truth breathe where lies could not survive. The invitation came 2 weeks later. A family celebration, a birthday, a full house,
Cameras out.
smiles ready. The perfect stage they never knew they were standing on. They thought I was still the girl who believed their story. They were wrong. I arrived early. That was deliberate. When people arrive early, no one questions their presence. They assume you are helping, being polite, fitting into the shape they remember. I smiled, hugged, commented on the decorations. I played the role they had written for me years ago, the quiet one who accepted loss without resistance. Inside, I was steady, calm in a way that only comes after certainty. My phone was already recording, not visibly, not dramatically, just enough. The house filled quickly. Laughter echoed off the walls. Glasses clinked. My aunt moved through the room like a queen inspecting her court, proud of the life she had built. My uncle stood near the window, telling the same story he always told about surviving the crisis, about sacrifices, about how hard those years had been on him. When he caught my eye, he nodded with sympathy. The same look he gave me when he told me the house was gone. I waited. Timing matters when truth is involved. Too early, and it sounds like accusation. Too late, and people are already drunk on distraction. I waited until everyone was seated, until the room settled into that brief, quiet expectation that comes before a toast. I stood up. They thought I was going to say something kind. I thanked them first. I thanked them for inviting me, for always keeping me close to the family, for protecting me during such a difficult time after the crisis. I watched my aunt relax. I watched my uncle exhale. Then I changed the tone. I said that grief had a strange way of clarifying things over time. That distance teaches you to ask better questions. That sometimes what you lose is not what you think it is. Someone laughed nervously. Someone shifted in their chair. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the television without asking. The screen lit up. Property records.
Dates. Names.
Transaction values. Silence fell fast. I explained everything slowly, not emotionally, not angrily, like a case study. I showed how the house had been transferred, how it had never been seized, how it had been renovated and sold for a profit that none of us had ever been told about. My uncle stood up, his face red, his mouth already forming excuses. I did not stop. I showed the timelines, the bank statements, the shell accounts, the renovations paid for within weeks of the sale. I reminded them of the nights I had cried, believing the house was gone forever, of the times they watched me struggle while sitting on money that came from my childhood walls. My aunt tried to speak. I raised my hand, calm and steady. I told them I was not asking for pity. I was correcting a record. Then I told them something they did not expect. This was not just a family conversation. I turned the screen again. This time, a live stream interface appeared. Comments already rolling in. Viewers climbing by the second. The journalist I had spoken to earlier was watching. So was a lawyer. So were people who understood exactly what financial manipulation looked like when it hid behind the word family. My aunt's voice broke. My uncle demanded I turn it off. I did not. I said the final part clearly, so there would be no misunderstanding. I had given them years of silence. They had used it to protect themselves. Now the truth would protect me. I ended the stream without drama.
No shouting. No threats.
Just facts laid bare. People left early that night. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Doors closed softly, like everyone was afraid of making noise in the presence of something irreversible. As I walked out, my uncle called my name. For the first time, he sounded small. I did not turn around. Some losses are not tragedies. Some are corrections. And I was not done yet. The morning after the live stream, I woke up without the familiar weight in my chest.
No panic. No regret.
Just a quiet clarity that told me something had shifted permanently. My phone was already full. Messages from distant relatives who suddenly remembered my name. Old neighbors who recognized the house the moment I showed the photos. Strangers who had lived through the same lie and were thanking me for saying out loud what they never could. But the most important messages came later. The lawyer I had consulted weeks earlier called me before noon.
Calm.
Precise. He confirmed what I already knew. The evidence was strong. Stronger than most family fraud cases because it was clean.
Documented.
Deliberate. Within days, formal notices were sent. Requests for explanation. Demands for disclosure. The polite, legal language that sounds nothing like revenge, but accomplishes far more. My aunt tried to call me that evening. I let it ring. My uncle sent a long message about misunderstandings, about intentions, about how they thought they were protecting me. I read it once. I did not reply. Protection does not involve secrecy. Love does not profit from silence. A week later, the story broke beyond my channel. A short segment.
No sensationalism.
Just facts. A family property quietly resold after a crisis. A relative misled for years. Funds redirected. Trust violated. Their names were not the headline. The pattern was. That is when things truly changed. The accounts were frozen pending investigation. The money they had hidden so carefully was suddenly very visible, very traceable, and very contested. The house, long gone, became symbolic rather than physical. It was no longer about bricks or walls. It was about accountability. They reached out again. This time through lawyers. They offered a settlement. Not an apology. A settlement. I accepted it under one condition. That the agreement include a full written admission of what they had done, and that it be filed. Not hidden. Not buried under legal language.
Clear. Direct. Permanent.
They hesitated. Then they agreed. When the fund hit my account, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time and stared at the number. It was more than money. It was proof that the version of me they had underestimated no longer existed. I did not buy a house right away. Instead, I paid off every debt I had accumulated during the years I thought everything was lost. I invested carefully. I donated part of it to an organization that helps families fight property fraud because I learned how lonely that battle can be. And then I told my story one last time. Not as an expose. not as a confrontation, but as a conclusion. I spoke about how loss can be manufactured, how trust can be manipulated, how silence is often mistaken for weakness, and how truth, when documented, does not need to shout. I ended the video by saying something simple. They told me the house was lost forever. What they really lost was control over the story. I have not spoken to them since. Some bridges do not collapse. They simply lead nowhere once you stop walking toward them. And I finally understood this. The house I thought I lost was never the foundation of my life. Knowing the truth was